So now we're going to talk about technology, and I encourage our listeners to keep asking questions using the hashtag CybosTradecast, and we will endeavor to get them answered by our brilliant panel. So, Chris, everyone talks about the acceleration of digitalisation in the trade finance space. What's been happening and how has the pandemic accelerated processes? And can you perhaps give any examples of this?
I don't think we have the time to give examples. I think, again, supply chain has been on the forefront, right, of defining what digital is. And for everyone in the supply chain, literally, right? How do we interact? What tools we need? What does it mean to be digital for everyone? And what do we need to do to enable, right? How does that interconnectivity work for everyone? So at IBM, what we focus on, number one, is to bringing on a collection of technologies, ours, our partners, and everyone to enable this process to take place. But the most important things that are coming out are number one, security, number two, compliance. So we get the confidence, right, in the digital supply chain. But then some of the newer technologies like low code, no code, right? An ability to onboard digitally. What does that require, right? Also model-driven designs to enable to visualize the entire trade life cycle and see what this looks like where you are in a given point, to give a visualization to every participant, what needs to be done. Finally, I think the last piece is artificial intelligence, allowing us to anticipate, right? Not only the issues, but anticipate what the client wants to do and give the client options at every single point of that cycle. So for us, and then taking a look at back, how do we step back and what technologies apply to each one of those? Again, IBM and non-IBM. We're in hybrid space, enabling our big clients and small clients as well.
Absolutely. And Jeff, question to you. How do you go about choosing platforms? And there are many banks on this webinar right now. So it'd be good for you to give a bit of a bit of advice. And can you talk about any of the current projects that Bova are working on within the digital trade and supply chain finance space?
Yeah, so there are a couple of sort of philosophical boxes that we want to check right up front when we think about a platform. What we'd love to do, I think, in the banking community is we love to stick with what we're good at. And, what we know that we bring to the table is we bring sort of the balance sheet, the ability to finance. We bring an investor pool to a large extent. And then also we bring connectivity to corporate clients all over the world. And I think, a natural corporate connectivity that we bring. So I think, that's something that the banks will always do really well. And I think, everywhere in the world, which is a sort of a home market for a group of banks, they have a sort of a core group of clients where they have the influence, the connectivity, and sort of the need to be able to create this value for them. So I think, when we think about that as the first thing, then we think about a platform or how we can facilitate that. And I think, you use the word ecosystem and you're sort of opening six sort of themes. And I think, overused as it may be, it is an ideal word to describe what it is that we are trying to achieve, right? We're trying to achieve connectivity to an ecosystem. So the way we always approach sort of a platform or a solution is we want it to be ubiquitous, right? We want it to be something that will work because everybody does it, if everybody does it, and not sort of force our clients to sort of bet on one horse, if you will. We'd rather not say, here's a platform that we own and operate, please log into it and transact everything here, and then go back into your own platform and do what you do. That doesn't seem very ubiquitous for us, and sort of and naturally creates that sort of friction, that mechanical friction that we keep talking about. So, we really are looking at an adaptable, malleable ecosystem where we can facilitate transactions for our clients doing the things that we do. They need to be finance transactions, loan transactions. They need to be able to connect to our sort of loan records, which are regularly scrutinized by our regulators and overseers. So, all of that needs to happen, but it also needs to be sort of user friendly for the client. So that low friction environment, that efficient digital paperless sort of environment, and one that can connect to the ecosystem. So that's what we're really looking for. And then, as part of that, clearly scalability. What we'd like is, as I said, an adaptable and a malleable sort of environment where we don't have to sort of say, we've got a platform, in 5 years, we're going to create a new platform, or we're constantly going to have to build out a platform. What we'd really like is something that's more of sort of some architecture that we can be fluid with, right? And we can sort of build and even sort of tear down as we go where needed. And, Madhav talked about a few things in flight. We're working with our great partners at IBM around sort of, a couple of different parts of our supply chain. One around being able to do things that have traditionally been very, very paper intensive in a more digital way, right? So those of us in trade finance, sort of, some of these things need no introduction, open account processing, et cetera, some of the transactional type business that we do. And how can we sort of create something that's more digital and then sort of allows for a more frictionless transaction where we don't need to be so mechanical with how we achieve it. Madhav talked a little bit about sort of our embedded solutions where we can sort of allow for an environment in which our clients could perhaps transact in their own operating system, right? And then connect back through whether it's API or whether it's blockchain to be able to sort of allow the bank to be able to record those transactions. And then, there's certainly the operational component of that as well, where we've got sort of things like compliance checks, et cetera, that we're doing with AI. And I think that's also a real part of, our solution and how we think about the platform and the environment and how we transact. So all those things follow a common theme. Here at Bank of America, we sort of call it operational excellence, and always on is sort of the buzzword that we have. And the way we think about that is, all of this stuff needs to be, it needs to be scalable. It needs to be malleable. It needs to facilitate a wide body of transactions. It needs to be able to sort of check all the right boxes with the bank regulators, et cetera, the things that we need to do. And then we are very open to achieving this with partners, right? So this is where we look to the fintech community. We look to our great software vendors like IBM and the consulting services, et cetera, to be able to help us achieve this stuff. So, we're not looking for one thing, Dipesh. We're thinking about it very holistically, I think, as we think about our platforms.
Yeah. So look, Dipesh, one thing I wanted to add, as you think about sort of technology and the challenges for our business, right? I think what you see is really the two businesses, which is supply chain, which we've talked quite a bit, and the traditional trade. They're both at very different evolution of cycles of digital acceleration or transformation. For the traditional trade, the issue always has been there is a part of the business that's just paper intensive. And, so when you talk about digital, are you able to digitize the entire cycle, or are you digitizing only a component of it? But then what the COVID has shown is if you just digitize a component and the rest of it is all paper intensive, your problems never really go away. So the question for that part of the core business really is, how are you able to partner with technologies that can bridge the gap between taking the paper, digitizing the paper, making it much more data-driven, digital data-driven, and then completely digitizing the pieces that you can. And then on the supply chain finance side, which is already a very digital business to begin with, it's really about tapping into this various sort of corporate origination pools, which is basically connecting to the core. So very different ways of thinking about them digitally and technology, and where you want to partner to kind of move the needle forward from that perspective.
Thanks very much. And good to distinguish between those two pieces there, Madhav, and actually that was the kind of question I had in mind for you. Chris, a quick question from the audience. Given the accelerated drive to digitally transform, how do you see cloud computing enabling this evolution for corporate banking within GTB teams?
So as I look at it, my B of A partners have been very articulate and described well the entire operating model, right? And the components of operating model. What does the client service model look like, and the multi-channel access? What is the digital omni-channel interface, if you will, right? What is the data-based processing? Again, digital database processing, intelligent automation, and what are the set of global platforms that we need to take on? So to answer that question, right, Jeff and Madhav have really gone down the entire set of platforms, right, and said, well, how can that be enabled? What we do at IBM, we've captured all of that in our set of not only compliance and security environments, right, but how do we standardize all 5 pieces of that platform? Right? And how do we deliver that to the community, such as B of A and its clients, and beyond, to enable B of A and its clients to grow? So our underlying platform, FS Cloud, has been designed to accomplish all 5 components of the debate that we've been having here, everything from operating platform from a client level all the way through multiple flexible, right, but standardized platforms, right, that could be securely threaded together.
Thank you, Chris. I think that makes a lot of sense, and also, you know, hello to all the fintechs joining us here at the Cybos, at this Cybos Tradecast. I think it's very important to get that perspective both from yourself, Chris, and also Jeff, in terms of who you're looking at from a fintech and trade tech partnership perspective. Something else that's been mentioned in the comments on this Tradecast is all around cyber threats, and I guess, Chris, I'll ask this question to you. You know, we've seen an increased focus on cyber threats and a focus on public versus private clouds for financial data. What are the key differentiators in this place?
Well, to us at IBM, this has been at heart for multiple years, right? From the time we rolled out our Z machines, right, which enabled specific cryptography. So what Jeff and Madhav had mentioned, right, is an ability to secure data in motion, right, at any given time, and the concept of bring your own key and keep your own key, right? So as the data moves around, we have been able to design the cryptography to really protect this, not only when it emanates from our machines on-prem, right, our machines which run perhaps even the private clouds, then to public clouds, which we are actually focused on industry clouds. So we're focused on having a very specific financial services cloud, which has over 286 different regulations, which give that confidence of really stemming the cyber attacks, right? And I know many of us get attacked, and we don't want to talk about, or we don't want to put down any of our competitors, right? But from our perspective, at heart for us is to make sure that any transaction is compliant and safe, right? And that concept of cryptography is something that we bring to us in every step of a journey, not only from what we do, but also the great ISV community that joined us here on the webcast, right? We help them to bring that same confidence to all their clients. So it's this cryptography that enables us not only to transact on our machinery, but also to extend it via a product that we have called Satellite to our great partners out there, to anyone that participates in this entire supply chain of data.
Thanks, Chris.
Hey, Dipesh, one of the things, this becomes much more critical and important as we move forward, because traditional trade, as an example, right? There's so many pieces of paper today that then become digital and stored digitally, and ecosystem players accessing this digital environment. So, whether that is sitting in some private cloud, hybrid cloud, partnering with a partner that has the right set of sort of cyber, controls and stuff becomes even more important because you're moving to this much more sort of digitally native environment, if you will, right? So that becomes a heart of sort of what banks like us, have to evaluate as you sort of begin on this journey, which is very different than just for purely APIs, which is sort of data in motion, but this is much more comprehensive because the ecosystem nature of the digital data in itself.
Yeah. Just to follow up really quick, Dipesh, on this, about 3 years ago, we at IBM set out on a journey. How would we construct this hybrid cloud environment? And one of our foundational clients is B of A in the US and globally. We have other foundational clients, our anchor tenants, such as BNP Paribas, Bank of Tokyo, Mitsubishi. We got together and said, what are the global set of rules really that govern this, right? And we put together among our foundational anchor clients this set of global rules that will help us to secure and bring together an environment that we could all enjoy and ensure that everyone from the banks to fintechs to the suppliers to the manufacturers, everyone grows, right, and is able to transact in a way that benefits them.
Yeah, Chris, actually, your colleague Palm Sanger, talks about these ideas of these open rules, standards, etc., interoperability. I think that the standards piece, particularly some of the work around the ICC DSI, is really important to take into consideration there. Jeff, where are we at the moment in terms of what's your opinion on international standards and standardization of data in and around trade and supply chain finance?
It's a great question because I think, it's the boring part, but it's the necessary part. And I think, where we've really seen some good collaboration in the last 18 to 24 months has been around the standards. And I think, the ICC, BAFT has done some really good work around this. We've seen the WTO weigh in. I think, we're always sort of juxtaposing two things. One is how we can sort of facilitate some standardization that will allow for greater adoption and allow for greater sort of ease of transaction, while at the same time and very fairly, we're also working with the global regulatory community to make sure that there are the proper controls around all of these things. And, we're always sort of doing those two things concurrently. And, hopefully in a more perfect world, they all fit together very sort of uniquely. But, and I think that comes back to where we are able to create some global standards around things like digitization, some legal sort of issues, jurisdictional issues. Right alongside of that will be the data that sort of comes with being able to track the things that we are doing, and then sort of put those back to the overseers, the bodies that oversee the banks, the regulators, et cetera, so that we can sort of create standards that will facilitate the transaction, and then the transactions themselves will be sort of uniquely able to be vetted and controlled in a way that will sort of allow for, that global sort of transparency in some way that will sort of be the great facilitator. So I do think, Dipesh, I think the last time we spoke at Sibos, this was something that we had talked about. It continues to be something that we talk about. I think we've gone down the road a bit on the journey. We like the engagement that we've seen from the ICC and the WTO and BAFT and others, because I think it really helps to coagulate all of the sort of parties and the voices together. And I think that's been uniquely beneficial to us. So I think we expect to see that continue as well, but still very important.
Great, thank you very much. So now on to our last section of the Tradecast.
What should the world expect from a bank? Perhaps a bank dedicated to meeting the challenge of change. A bank that honors the business environment and the natural environment with equal passion. Providing people and businesses the tools and insights they need to succeed. And offering people and communities the resources to flourish. A bank that recognizes that economies fluctuate, but values don't. And never forgetting, our only ambition is to help you fulfill yours. What would you like the power to do?